Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Post Crisis Chat. As always, I'm your co host, Cookie, and with me is the ever present, ever mindful, ever hairy.
Hi, it's Randy here. If you're a first time viewer, welcome. Please remember to like the video and please subscribe to the channel and hit that bell notification so you can be notified next week when we upload our next episode.
Yeah, it seems like such a small thing to do, but like, it really helps the channel grow. We would appreciate it to make this channel grow. And if you're not a first time viewer, if this has been here multiple times with us, welcome back. We always love having you guys come back here. We're very thankful that you're here.
Absolutely. Please check out our socials. You can find us on Blue Sky and Patreon. Patrons get access to the Post Crisis Chat Book Club. Now, real quick, I'm going to do something that's not in the script here. I want to say thank you to our first patron, Bryce. He is our first and only patron. We're recording this on November 4th, 2025, which is well ahead of when it will be released. But I wanted to say thank you so much to him for actually being our first patron.
We appreciate the fact that we finally got a Patreon subscriber. So welcome. This is directed towards you and anyone who wants to join. Yeah, if you join and you get part of that book club, we'll tell you a week ahead of time which issues we will be recording a show for. Give you a chance to comment on those issues. You can read along with us. If you do any comments, we'll read those comments on the channel. There's a perk right there.
Absolutely. Please be advised, we will be talking about decades old spoilers in the issue we're discussing today. Today, we are talking about issue number 36 of Saga of the Swamp Thing, written by Alan Moore, pencils by Stephen Bissette. Yes, we're going to talk about that cover in a second. Inks by John Totlebon. And I want to start by talking about that cover because wow, it's gorgeous. I want to know why we can't get art this awesome inside the book. Swamp Thing's rotting and skeletonized corpse laying on the ground with Nuke Face behind him in an industrial setting. It is metal as the F word I'm not going to say.
Yeah, you don't want to get in trouble with 3 or 4 people that might get offended by it. I do have a question though. Why does Swamp Thing have a skeleton?
Because he remembers what it was to be a human. And he still shapes his body like a human. We've covered that in the past episodes.
But if you look at it, I mean, I'm gonna put up really close for the viewers there. If you see that looks like bone. Where did he get bone? Who did he kill and absorb into his body that he can now have bone for a skeleton?
His body shapes itself because he remembers being a human body.
But it would
He
be wood
covered
then, right?
this. Say that again?
But it would be wood, not human bone.
I'm sure that plant like material and not because look how quickly it rotted. I mean, it rots really fast like a plant, but the shape is what matters.
Inside, it's different, but it's like on the cover, it looks like human bone. And I understand that you have to embellish things. I guess is the word I'm looking for to make them look cooler, and it's a cool looking cover. But You know, I'm throwing the theory out there for people. We can discuss it in the comments below. Maybe Swamp Thing's actually secretly a serial killer and he's been hiding the bodies within his own body. Just saying.
We'll get into the issue now. We see Swamp Thing's corpse burning away thanks to the toxic waste that Nuke Face forced down Swamp Thing's throat in the last issue. See our last episode if you'd like to know more about that. While Swamp Thing lays on the ground, stuck in his body and unable to move, suffering, his mind goes to Abby, who he left asleep after their communion a couple of issues ago. See 2 videos ago for more on that. We discussed their communion in depth. As the sun comes up, Swamp Thing notices his arm has rotted off. The way the words sit between Swamp Thing's severed arm and body at the bottom panel of page 2 is just absolute perfection. I mean, Bissett, sometimes he just nails it. He got this so right here.
Even when the artwork isn't well, I'll say to your level. I won't say to my level because a lot of times the artwork doesn't bother me that much. Even when it's like not up to your level, his panel work is still fantastic. Confess something here. This was one of those, I think it was a double page spread because when I read it, I read the first page and then I read the second page and I was like, okay, something doesn't line up here. And I believe you were supposed to read both pages left to right. Am I correct in that? Because
Are you talking about 2
it
and
just
3?
yeah, because it felt like 2 and 3. I don't know, maybe it's just like when I read it, I just wasn't in the right mind space or what, but it felt like it was supposed to be a double page.
When I read this, I typically read sitting down with a paper version of the book. But when we do the show, I have the book popped up on my iPad over here, and I use the DC Infinite service to view the books. And just going off the DC Infinite service, they will put a two-page spread in there if it's supposed to be, and this is not in there that way.
Okay, so it must have just been me. It felt like when I read it, it was supposed to be a two-page spread. Maybe I missed something, and that's why it didn't line up in the story at the time. It's just something didn't click with me at the time.
Swamp Thing starts to become afraid and calls out to Abby. He gets a brief vision of her meeting with a student at the place where she works, but that vision leaves quickly. As dusk falls, Swamp Thing becomes blind in one eye. It is night now, and Swamp Thing hears someone running nearby and shouting, "Why don't you leave me alone?" Whoever it was that shouts that stumbles away. A little later on, Swamp Thing hears a woman praying softly. Then later, the sound of many people calling out to each other. He hears this as he no longer exists from the waist down. In my opinion, the imagery and the words that Alan Moore is using here, they're just perfect. Try to imagine your body slowly, quickly, depending on your perspective, rotting away is horrific. Alan Moore does a really great job of giving me the willies here. Like I'm feeling for Swamp Thing here.
They did a really good job. I mean, it sounds like a joke, but it's almost like, did he draw on some past experiences with drug use or something like that? The way that he's kind of talking about the way the body's rotting, the way things are like, did he know someone that died a painful death? Because he gets really in depth on the way that Swamp Thing is basically dying. It's very well written, very creepy. This is why a lot of people considered him the master of this stuff because he does such a good job writing this.
I feel like kind of the nuke face issues are almost throwaway issues. They're not that important, but he still took that detail and put it into the book like that and did such a great job at the horror aspect of it. It really shows off exactly why he's considered the great writer that he is. Swamp Thing relates to Abby, what is happening in his plan. Right after that, his jaw falls off, and Swamp Thing says that he died. Which Swamp Thing's died what, at least twice before?
He's died a couple times. That's why I did the air quotes on the dying. On top of the fact of we're literally discussing the Alan Moore run of Swamp Thing. And it wouldn't be much of a run if it was like, 10 issues in and then kill off Swamp Thing and the book is done. Obviously, everyone knows that.
And we still got at least 15 issues to go after that. I think a few more, really. And then we switch to Officer Bernhardt with no indication of who this man is. He mentions that Diagonal Bob disappeared. I suspect that this is Ed Bob from the last issue. See our last video for more on Ed Bob. Wallace from the last issue shows up in Louisiana and hears Officer Bernhardt talking about what happened with Ed Bob. The officer mentions that Wallace turned up later on talking about a monster that got his wife. At the time I was reading this, I suspected that was Nukeface.
I mean, anyone reading this probably would suspect the same thing. Like, even I was like, okay, I kind of know what's happening here. But there is a little bit of a mystery. I wasn't, I guess you could say, smart enough to figure out what happened because, like, where I believe it's on this page, or no, no, I'm sorry, it happens later on. But like in Wallace's story, something happens that kind of leads me to think, like, okay, something like they're leading towards something towards the end of the issue, and I'm waiting for the big reveal that I didn't catch up on.
Well, when we get there, let's talk about it.
Definitely, because it's actually a little heartbreaking to me.
Okay, I'm curious now. The officer finds Ed Bob in the swamp, dead as we left him last issue. The officer is telling all these stories later on while he's playing cards with friends and complaining about the hand he was dealt. Clever double entendre there, Mr. Moore. Then we switch to Wallace Monroe, talking about the same events that the officer told us about. He's with his wife and says he wants to hold her, but something that we haven't seen happen yet stops him from doing so. He actively starts backing away from her. As somebody who has been married almost 15 years now, reacting to my wife that way, I can't imagine what would have to happen for me to react that way to her, and also the horrible feelings that she would have if I reacted that way to her. I mean, that's
That's
just
understandable.
talk about
It's
heartbreaking.
very understandable. But this is the mystery that I'm talking about. This is the thing that I'm like, okay, why does he do that? Obviously, we're going to find out later on in the issue, and then this is where the heartbreaking thing kind of hits me. Like, oh, that was a little bit of a gut punch.
Okay, we'll get there. We go back in time to Wallace and Treasure arriving in Louisiana from Pennsylvania, where they were last issue. Again, see our last video for more. We get more of the conversation between the officer and the woman about Ed Bob. Wallace finds it strange that derelicts are going missing here like they were going missing in Pennsylvania. Later at the hotel, Wallace goes out to buy a paper. He sees children playing and they are scaring each other by one child wearing a bag on their head and an oversized coat, chasing the other children. The other children are screaming and running away from Nuke Face. Wallace freaks the F out and shouts at the kids, running them off. Back at the hotel, Wallace tells
Uh,
Treasure he's going for a walk. Okay, I'll pause. What did you have something to say?
I was going to say the nuke face thing I thought was kind of funny with him yelling at the kids just because it was like, it feels like they're building nuke face up to be something special. And how, like you said earlier, like they felt like these were kind of a throwaway issue. And then that's another thing I want to discuss. I think more likely when we get to the next episode, remind me and I'll bring that up because it feels like this is supposed to be like a big arc. And once again, I kind of feel a little bit let down on something.
Okay, we'll get there. So he's freaked out that these kids know about Nukeface and thinks that his company is to blame. He decides to go search the swamps for Nukeface. I'm not sure why he would do that because I think we pretty much established that Nukeface is disappearing people. And yes, my first instinct is to go out at night into the middle of the swamp where somebody is disappearing people out in the swamp.
I mean, the only thing I could say about that is like that makes me think of that old joke of the difference between black people and white people in horror movies. If black people are smart enough to know to run the hell away, and white people walk right into danger. And I can say, as a white person, yeah, I'd probably end up doing something stupid like that.
Yeah, he certainly did. Wallace gets lost, wandering around for hours. He gets paranoid and yells, "Why don't you leave me alone?" Even though there was no one there, which calls back to when Swamp Thing heard somebody say that. Good callback, Alan Moore. Eventually, Wallace does find his way back to the hotel and finds a note from Treasure saying that she has gone to get milk and he should stay put at home. The note has 8:30 as the time. 2 hours later, he goes to the police about a missing wife. They send out a search party and find her as she wanders in out of nowhere. She tells Wallace where she has been, and he is not happy. We switch characters again, and next we jump to Mrs. Morel, the woman who is talking to Officer Barnhart about Ed Bob. The woman identifies Ed Bob's body at the morgue and continues to gossip about other people. Then we switch to Treasure, unsure of what she has done wrong and why Wallace is backing away from her. She remembers the past and how she went to buy milk because she'd asked Wallace to and he never came back. She was also looking for Wallace. While she was out and looking, she came across Nukeface. I think, anyway. It's so hard to tell because the issue when he draws Nukeface is really messed up last issue, and in this issue, he looks almost normal in these panels. Once again, Bissett's artwork is completely inconsistent. Anyway,
Yeah,
she gives Nukeface her coat and lays down next to him to keep him warm. She mentions he has a skin disease and that his skin glowed. Hmm.
I gotta admit that bothered me just because I don't know. I know she's Christian. It seemed like they touched on that last issue. I think their like Christianity kind of thing, and I think that's why she's supposed to be so generous and trusting and stuff like that.
I'm going to interrupt you for a second. She actually does remember right at that moment that Jesus said to love the unlovable, and she says a prayer for Nukeface out loud. So you're absolutely right.
But even with that, it's like I can't honestly say I've ever. met a Christian, a Mormon, anyone that's that loving that they would lay down next to a person. I mean, that seems a little too trusting to me. I would assume if you saw somebody glowing, that's where you would be like, no, that's a little too much.
She seems like maybe not the brightest crayon in the box, honestly. Like overall.
Yeah, especially the fact that it's why would you walk out in the middle of the swamp in the middle of the night like that to go look for your husband? That feels like the husband got it right. Let's go get the cops to go look for him or look for her. Maybe she should have done the same thing.
Yeah, once again, not the brightest. But then after she says this prayer out loud, she falls asleep next to the glowing man. Smart. Then Treasure wakes up and listens for a heartbeat. She does not hear one and presumes that Nukeface has died. Is still never questioning why his skin is glowing. And then she walks out of the swamp and into the search party looking for her. She tells Wallace that she was in the swamp all night, laying next to a glowing man. Wallace, once again, freaks the F out. He does that a lot, actually, and almost as annoying as early Alan Moore issues of Abby. Wallace tells Treasure that they need to find a doctor and tells her to stay away from him and the police. Treasure screams at Wallace, asking what she has done wrong. And I want to give big props to the letterer here for showing through that lettering how desperate she really is, because it's just palpable. You can feel it the way that's,
Yeah. At this point, I figured it out a little bit. Like I had an idea of what was going on at this point of like what the quote unquote like mystery of why Wallace was freaking out and everything. And I'm assuming other people who have read it have kind of pieced that little puzzle together as well. I can wait until the end to do the big reveal, but I'm sure we're all on the same page here.
Yeah, we'll get there. Then we switch to Billy Hatcher, one of the kids you saw Nukeface out in the swamp. We learn that that's how the kids knew about him and why they were playing the game. We find out that also at that point, the treasure is in the hospital thanks to her experience, which I think that was mostly there for how they got access to Nukeface. I think that part was mostly so we could be acknowledged that treasure's now in the hospital.
Did you notice, like, 'cause I know you're always one to go on and on about the artwork and the inconsistencies and such. Did you notice the fact that Billy, in the first panel we see him, the last panel down there at the bottom, to me he looks like he's like a 20-year-old junkie or something. Like he looks off. Like I don't know what they were going for with that, but he does not look like a kid anymore. I could not figure out how old this kid was supposed to be.
I'm going to be honest, the artwork in this issue was generally so poor that I would just, every single page, I would be like, the artwork's bad, the artwork's poor, the
Yeah.
faces look like somebody's having a stroke. I'd be saying something about
The,
it the
the,
entire issue if I brought up every.
yeah, I
It's
won't
all
bring up
bad.
everything. I won't bring up everything. This was just the main one that bothered me because when we first saw the kids, when Wallace was yelling at them in his part of the story, they looked like little kids. They looked like maybe 12, 13, something like. In this page, at least Billy kind of jumps around from when we first see him, okay, maybe about 12, 13, and then he looks when he first runs into Nuke Face, looks like maybe, I don't know, 10 years old. And then we got 20-year-old hobo junkie. It's all over the place. It was not a very well done page. I apologize to Mr. Bissette because I don't want to criticize. I mean, he's a better artist than I am, but this was not a good looking page.
In any art criticism I give, I am a terrible artist. I'm a writer. I've professionally written things in the past and gotten paid for them. I am 100% a writer and not at all an artist. My best art consists of stick figures. So I'm only criticizing based on the number of comics I've read, not based on my own talent, because I don't have any. Next, we switch to Abby waking from confused dreams. She's a little sad that Swamp Thing isn't there, but figures he went out for a morning walk. She takes the bus to work. She mentions that she stays in town during the week and travels on the weekends to see Swamp Thing. While she's at work, working with a kid, Swamp Thing flashes into her brain. She leaves work and goes searching for Swamp Thing in the swamp with a flashlight. She hears people crashing through the swamp, the search party from before, and continues to look for Swamp Thing. She finds but barely recognizes him. He tells her he's poisonous and she should not come close. Swamp Thing relates his body is dying and he's going to transfer his consciousness like he did back in the anatomy lesson issue. He says he'll be trying to build a new body. He reveals he suffered through the previous night, day, and now part of this night, so he could stay awake long enough to tell her he loves her. My gosh, that is so incredibly sweet. Like he sat there suffering. He could have abandoned that body, and he sat there suffering because he wasn't 100% sure he was going to come back, and he wanted to make sure Abby knows that he loves her.
At the heart, you could almost say Swamp Thing is it's a horror story, but it's also a love story.
100%. So then Swamp Thing dissolves into a skeletal figure. It's interesting that even though we know Swamp Thing doesn't even need a skeleton or lungs or other human features, the memory of his human body means he still builds his body like a human's body, which goes back to what we were talking about, on the cover. I think that's why he looks the way he does in the comic. It's just that memory of being a human.
And that makes sense. But in here, you're not seeing the color of bone, black. So it's like it could be bark, it could be anything. In the cover, it looks like bone. And I mean, maybe the coloring is just, like the light is shining it the wrong way. And so it's kind of giving off that glow to make it look whitish or something. But I don't know. I stand by what I said. It's a weird looking cover for the fact that he should have no bones.
I see where you're coming from. Next, we switch to Nuke Face. I like how they used paper cutouts to introduce his section, like a serial killer would use. And given that Nuke Face is a serial killer, I think it's very appropriate. And then I'm also going to go back and touch on Nuke Face does not look as messed up in this issue as he did in the last issue. He looks like maybe somehow he's healed a little bit. I got to be honest, the inconsistencies are very annoying for me.
Really, especially because like when we first saw him in the last issue, he looked very creepy, and I liked that. Again, it plays into the horror element of the comic. I liked what was going on with that design, and they really threw that out the window on this one because yeah, he's got his he's got his nose back. Like when we first saw him, he did not have a nose.
Yeah, and he looks like he's got chicken pox. Dude has
Yeah,
a rash on his face, and that's the only thing wrong with him.
yeah, it's not. I was disappointed in that because it really oh, man. When we first saw him, it was such a cool design. I loved the way it looked, how creepy it was. And I mean, I remember like we went on for like it felt like 5 or 10 minutes about I think it was like a finger or something like that. It's just like the design they did on him was really creepy. And then now, yeah, like get a couple of the oxy pads, wipe that up, and then you're
Yeah,
you're good to
yeah.
go, buddy.
We see that he's remembering last issue where the barrel of toxic waste was buried in the swamp. He remembers forcing toxic waste down Swamp Thing's throat, but the way that New Face remembers it, he was helping Swamp Thing by giving him the last of his precious toxic waste. Swamp Thing was supposed to then help Nuke Face dig up the barrel. Nuke Face is obviously delusional.
I mean, if you're drinking toxic waste, that's probably going to mess with your mind as much as it is going to be your body. I like that bottom panel on that page. It looks creepy, but it gives a good vibe because it the way he's talking about the camp, it almost feels there's a story that could have been told there of maybe did he kill everybody in his homeless camp?
By forcing toxic waste down their throats, probably, because he thought he was helping.
And that's one of the things I love about 80s comics. Modern comics, they will stretch that idea out for multiple issues, like a 5 issue arc, doing that whole following that story of him with the homeless camp and such. And with 80s comics, it's just a little throwaway part. We're never going to find out probably more about it or anything. It's just that one panel tells that specific part of the story, and the rest is left to your imagination.
Yeah.
That's one of the things I liked about 80s comics.
So yeah, lots of implied situations there, and that's something I hadn't thought about before. After that, Nukeface is having problems remembering exactly where he is and why. Though he thinks he dreamed of Treasure and notes how she was like his mom, he thinks it was a nice dream. Nukeface decides he needs more toxic waste and says, "Heads up, America," because he is coming looking for it. However, per the DC Wiki, this is the last time we see Nukeface.
To me, what the disappointing thing is that it felt like we were kind of being set up for a little bit more. Like Nuke Face was going to be something important to this, and he doesn't even show up in any other. Teen Titans don't fight him. Justice League never meets. It's like he's just out there somewhere wandering the world, possibly dead, possibly alive. Who knows? That to me was a little bit of a letdown.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. He wasn't all that compelling of a villain.
He wasn't. I mean, he really wasn't a great villain, even really that great of a character. He did technically serve his purpose. The open-endedness of it felt a little bit like you could have just easily killed him, just have him die there, and like in the swamp. That would have been perfect.
Yeah. Now that we're at the end, I did also want to point out the newspaper clippings throughout the issue that warn of nuclear disasters and other environmental calamities. It was kind of cool, but I also think it was an excuse for Bissett not to have to draw more art. I really, really wish they'd find another artist for this book. But I did want to point out the thing in relation to what I just noticed right now. One of those newspapers that's kind of going along the ground at the end, that's right next to Nuke Face. He's saying, "Here I come," with his arms stretched out like that. There's a newspaper at the bottom that says "The End" with a question mark. Well placed, actually. And if that was Bissett, good job to Bissett for placing a newspaper there so he didn't have to do any art. But no, it was well placed with the end and the question mark.
I would have liked to have. I don't know the timing of when this issue came out, but if it would have been timed right, it would have been cool to have one of those news articles talking about the coming crisis of like if crisis was happening at the time or not or whatever. Like maybe throw something that, or that also would have been a perfect time to throw in like whatever else was going on in the DC universe.
This is a tad before Crisis.
Okay, 'cause I don't remember the timeline, but still, like there's stuff that was happening in the DCU that could have been. It would have been cool to throw that in and throw more tie-in to that Swamp Thing's happening in the same universe.
That's coming. Specifically, this comic would have been dated on the cover May of '85. And I believe that Crisis started July, maybe August of '85, at least based on the cover date on the comics.
Okay, that makes sense. I mean, still, you could have thrown in something else that was happening, like just an article about something with the Joker and Gotham. I don't know. I mean, it's a small little detail. It doesn't take away. It doesn't add. It just would have been kind of a fun little like Easter egg to throw in. I mean, we already know it's happening in the same universe because we've had the crossovers, but I don't know. I like that stuff. It's kind of fun to see those little connections.
I agree. I agree that would have been fun. Although I'll be honest, I didn't pay attention to most of the newspaper clippings. I read a couple of headlines here and there just to get an idea to understand it was talking about environmental disasters, but
Yeah.
I didn't pay too close attention to those. It was just an excuse for Bissett to not have to draw something. Overall, I'm going to give this issue 2.25 Bobs. The art was mostly mediocre. The story wasn't all that interesting, although I do give credit to the story the way it was told through flashbacks. You're a little bit confused at first, but then through the series of flashbacks, you get a better understanding of what happened. Definitely one movie I think of off the top of my head was called 1114, which is kind of a flashback storytelling was used to great success. It's 4 or 5 different people in groups coming together at 11:14 p.m. and what exactly happens and how they all got together at 11:14 and this just huge mess of a situation happens and then you flash back and see how each of the groups got to that point. And I felt like that this flashback storytelling was used really well in the book like that.
I agree. I like that they kind of did that. The two things that popped in my mind were Pulp Fiction a little bit, how Pulp Fiction kind of jumped around
It did. Yep.
a lot. There's a Japanese story called Rashomon,
I've
I've
not
never
seen
read
that
it,
one.
but it's a book. I believe they did a movie of it too. I've never seen the movie either, but the book, it was referenced in a movie I like called Ghost Dog: Way of the Warrior or Way of the Samurai. I forget what it was. Ghost Dog, but with Forrest Whitaker, and they talk about it in there. And it's the same thing. It's like it's four separate stories from different perspectives, which again is kind of what we were getting from this.
Right.
Your rating, I will agree with. The artwork, and even though the story, I liked the story structure. The story itself was just kind of meh. Like the most impressive thing to me was just the heartbreaking thing of basically we know what happened to Treasure in the sense of it's like she got radioactive like radiation poisoning from being around Nuke Face. I don't remember if they mentioned it in this issue or not. I thought they did because I think that's why I felt so like gut punched was the baby. Was like how is that going to affect the baby with her being pregnant? And I was like that's pretty big sucker punch to like the soul right there. Kind of feel for this family.
And I want to say that they mentioned the baby was not well. I don't remember the exact panel or page. I'm not going to go look for it. If you happen to know, let us know in the comments. But I want to say there was just an offhand mention that the baby was not well.
That's another hanger that I'm going to suspect we never get a definitive answer to. It's not like the baby's going to come back as a radioactive mutant and fight Swamp Thing. So, it's one of those things like we'll probably never know. And that leaves you feeling a little bit that dagger in your heart of like, man, that's dark.
Some writer at DC should come pick up this thread, Nuke Face, the potentially toxic waste baby, and just run with this story. I mean, it's untapped potential here.
Just keep it away from Brian Michael Bendis.
I do also want to give props to Alan Moore for the tender moment between Swamp Thing and Abby. I think it really shows how their relationship is developing, which was honestly the only really interesting part of the story for me. The rest of the story, last issue and this issue, I don't care. But seeing the relationship between Swamp Thing and Abby developing, that's what I'm here for.
Aside from that, it was a major throwaway. If these two issues were major throwaway issues that just felt okay, what was the purpose of this? It feels like you're setting up for something, but I also kind of feel like you're setting up for payoffs we're never ever going to get.
So here's what I think it is. Sitting here talking about it and thinking about it and knowing what happens in the next issue. I think Alan Moore was mandated that he was going to have to start his crisis story in Swamp Thing 37. Not the direct story itself, but start setup for the crisis story. And so he only had those two issues where he had to just do a quick story in those two issues. And I think that's why it was a throwaway. He just pulled something out of his butt because he knew he wasn't going to be able to tell a longer form story. Because after this, we get a longer form story.
That definitely makes sense. I mean, and to be fair, even for a throwaway issue, or two throwaway issues, it was still well written. I mean, like we went on and on about how descriptive and even important details do happen within the story. It feels you expected a little bit more, no pun intended,
Good one.
compared to like a modern day throwaway story. It's still pretty good. I'll give him credit on that.
I think that's going to bring us to the end of our show.
It's going to do it for us. I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. We're really glad that you're here watching with us. I do want to apologize if you saw me kind of looking off to the side a lot tonight. It's because my cat was driving me crazy. That happens when you have animals. We do this for the love of the comics medium. So we're hoping that you tune in for the love of the comics medium and we have a good show.
Absolutely. I love comics. When I have any downtime, I'm reading comics. We were playing Magic the Gathering last night, and I had a comic off to the side when it wasn't my turn. I was kind of glancing over there and turning pages. Probably rude of me, but it's comics. It's worth it. Also, don't forget to check the description down below for links to our Amazon affiliate page. You can pick up the book that we're reading tonight in various formats. If you click the Amazon affiliate link to make the purchase, a little bit of your purchase comes back to the channel and it doesn't cost you anything extra.
That's always a nice thing. Also, I just want to point out to keep this in, you just totally stole my line, but that's okay. I'm going to leave it alone and I'm going to go ahead and read the green part.
Oh, crap. Sorry.
But
I
that's
jumped
okay.
ahead. I
So,
got
anyways,
excited.
anyways, you can follow us on Blue Sky. The link is in the description. on Blue Sky. We'll be discussing on there, excuse me, when we post new episodes. And then if you like this video, we would really appreciate it if you would give us a subscribe and then smack that like video, comment as soon as possible, get those first comments in because that's going to help this channel grow and definitely need to grow.
Yep. And lastly, a big shout out to our editor, Nacho King. You're the man.
Yes, we cannot do this without you, Big Papa Smurf.
All right. So we're at the closing. And we found a sign off phrase that we like, that I liked, which is, may your fruit hang low and your jungle always be trimmed. We might have to come up with a new one when it's not Swamp Thing anymore, but I'm digging this one for Swamp Thing.
You know what? I actually like that idea. In fact, we'll keep this in too. The viewers, they can comment at the bottom if you guys like this one for Swamp Thing and want us, like when we switch over to, let's say, Batman or Outsider or something, come up with a new sign off. Let us know, and I will get to work on that.
100% do that. All right. Well, thanks, everybody. Have a good night.